Well, Deborah Glass, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Doing me out of a job?
I don't think there's any chance of that.
But it's that sort of area, and that's why it's great. Before we get to it, it was reported yesterday that you have taken to IBAC complaints about the reporting of ambulance red code and orange code in the ambulance system and discrepancies the opposition has raised there. Are you able to say why?
Look, lots of things get reported that I can't comment on, and I should just explain to your listeners that, you know, the law doesn't allow me to either confirm or deny when we're dealing with whistleblower-type cases, so sorry.
Okay, no, I understand that. Fair enough. Now, what happens? I come along to you, I've got a leaky roof and can't get it fixed. What happens?
Well, you're in public housing. I mean, let's assume this is a public entity
housing,
because
yep.
I only deal with public sector, government type agencies. But we deal with a lot of complaints about public housing, people whose roofs haven't been fixed, maintenance, black mould, you name it. So there's a lot of complaints about poor maintenance in public housing, and what we will do is look at every complaint on their merits, but with something like that, you'll engage with the agency, with the Office of Housing, and see if we can get a solution. And very often we do, because they're very responsive, and the problem, usually following a phone call from the Ombudsman, gets fixed.
Well, it's a bit like the police calling up, isn't it?
Well, there are. We call it the nudge of the Ombudsman's elbow. Not everything needs an investigation. Sometimes it just takes that phone call to go, hang on a second, what's going on here?
22,000 a year, is that right?
Oh, roughly that. I mean, obviously, these are. I mean, our numbers will change by the day, but I think the reason I put this report out is that people do think of my office in terms of the big cases, the red shirts, the dodgy politicians, and actually that's a really, really tiny percentage of what the office does.
Would you like to name those dodgy politicians for me?
They're in public reports that in the public domain, and I say no more about them. The real bread and butter of my office is dealing with people's complaints about their local councils, about government agencies like Vic Roads or the Transport Accident Commission or prisons or, you name it. There are over 1,000 agencies and departments in Victoria that I can deal with. In
your report, Case Study 13, a victim of identity theft gets overrun with fines. My old mate's at Fines Victoria, and I've spent years, whenever we mention Fines Victoria, we still get swamped with problems. Example there, what happened there?
Well, this is a woman who was getting a whole lot of fines that she clearly hadn't deserved, yeah. Because she was the victim of identity theft. She provided stat declarations to really to confirm that it wasn't her, and there just seemed to be a lot of confusion around some of those fines were overturned, but not all of them. So she was still lumbered with, I think it was about a $500 fine for something that she hadn't done, and it wasn't being overturned. So
Fines Victoria was saying, no, you got to pay it.
Well, it is complicated. Yes, they were, but it is complicated because it is up to the issuing agency, in this case Victoria Police, to have done the right thing. So sometimes what it takes is coordination between agencies, and what we were able to do in this case is, having made inquiries with Fines Victoria, they then liaised with Victoria Police and agreed to overturn that fine. And that was a good thing.
You make a really good point there, and talk about the nudge of the Ombudsman's elbow, the nudge of the publicity elbow too, sometimes with Fines Victoria. And it happened with the passport office too. We're having awful troubles down there. People waiting 6 months for a passport, and they were due to leave the country 2 months ago. And we'd ring and ask, and the next day it was available.
Well, we had very similar experience with birth, deaths and marriages. So this is, again, in jurisdiction. We get many, many complaints about the registry of birth, deaths and marriages. And sometimes for very similar reasons, people they need their a certificate to get a passport to leave the country, and sometimes it's urgent. And particularly since COVID shutdowns, service hours have dropped, responsiveness is not as good as it was, and things just don't happen the way they should. So nudge of the Ombudsman's elbow, and people get their certificates.
So some of them still not really reopened after the lockdown for COVID.
We have found that people have dropped their service hours. Very disappointing, but again, this is part of the purpose of putting out reports like this is to expose those sorts of issues and encourage agencies to do better.
There was a problem through lockdown with, I think, birth, deaths and marriages. It might have been Fines Victoria. I think birth, deaths and marriages where you rang up and they said, no, we're locked down, there's nobody here to answer the phones.
Yeah,
That's
they shut down their service centre. It was, and we raised this with them. They've certainly improved since then, but we still get a lot of complaints.
What is the most complained about organised or group that you see, group of issue? I mean, is it parking tickets? Is it birthday? What is it?
Well, the most complained about agencies, and have been for a very long time, are prisons and local councils. But I think that says more about the level of accessibility to my office and how much people know than necessarily how bad they are. I don't think you can draw a conclusion that this makes people the worst. Because it may be that there are agencies out there who don't tell people how to complain, and those places that do will get the more complaints.
You're anxious, keen, wrong words, but you like the idea of people knowing you exist and want to contact you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. What sort of things? Anything to do with the public agency?
Well, it's public agencies. So, local councils, public sector agencies, Vic Roads, Fines Victoria, WorkSafe, there's $1,000. I won't name them all. Schools, universities and others all come in health, all come into that mix. But what we expect people to do, if you've got a complaint, if you've got a grievance, raise it first with the agency and give them a chance to fix it, because it's really important that, that they know what they have purportedly done wrong. But if you're really frustrated, if they're not fixing it, if the problem won't go away, then complain to the Ombudsman. That's what we're here for.
I've got a lot of experience in this area and making calls and knowing where to go and everything, so I won't trouble the Ombudsman. But I had one recently and I went round and round and round in circles, and in the end I was talking to a bot, and the bot said to me, "Do you want to talk to a human?" Well, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. And the human was absolutely useless, and in the end said, "You can't do it." And I said, "Why not?" And he really said, "Computer says no."
We get a lot of computer says no, and this is where the Ombudsman really can. This is where we do make a difference, because we will look at the decision making that sits behind a decision to give you a fine, or to not give you something, or to whatever it is that is making you feel really frustrated and angry. And computer says no isn't an answer. It just isn't an answer. And we will say that. And what happens, and again, this is the nudge of the Ombudsman's elbow, you put to somebody, well, hang on a second, how could that be fair? And usually they agree with us and they cave in.
The program with Computer Says No, have you seen that? What was it called?
That's Little Britain.
Little Britain. You done better than I do.
Yep. Little Britain. Yeah, it was very funny.
Very
but
real.
Not when it happens to you.